Have you ever noticed that sometimes your life isn't actually going that badly, but you still don't feel happy? You wake up. Nothing terrible has happened. Your family is there. Your home is there. Your work is there. Everything is more or less normal. And yet, something feels off. You pick up your phone. You scroll. Someone is traveling. Someone is getting married. Someone has lost weight. Someone has built a successful business. Someone seems to have the exact life you secretly wish you had. And suddenly, your own life doesn't feel quite as good anymore. You start thinking about what you're missing, what you haven't achieved, how much time you've wasted, how different your life was supposed to look by now. And here's the strange part. Nothing outside you changed. The room is the same. Your life is the same. But somehow, your entire mood changed. Why? What happened inside those few minutes? And what if this happens to you more often than you realize? What if you're not unhappy because your life is necessarily bad, but because you've slowly trained your mind to focus on everything that is wrong, missing, or not enough? And if that is true, then there's an even more interesting question. What would happen if you trained your mind in the opposite direction? What if you learned to stop fighting yourself, to stop comparing your journey, to stop carrying old pain into new days, to actually enjoy the life you're living while still working toward a better one? That's what we're going to explore today. So, welcome to Actionable Listener, a place where we don't just listen to ideas. We look at them closely, understand why they matter, and most importantly, figure out how they can actually change the way we live. Today, we're stepping into the world of Vex King's Good Vibes, Good Life. And I don't want you to listen to this like a traditional book summary. Instead, let's imagine we're sitting together for a while and simply asking, what if a better life begins with the way you treat yourself today? Because that is where this book becomes much more interesting. Before we get into the ideas, let's understand the person who wrote them. Vex King is an author, speaker, and personal development creator known for his work around self-love, positivity, mindfulness, spirituality, and emotional well-being. But his message wasn't created from a life where everything was easy. King has spoken about difficult experiences while growing up, including loss, financial hardship, and struggles with his own sense of identity and self-worth. And that background matters. Because Good Vibes, Good Life doesn't simply tell us to smile more and think positively. It explores something deeper. What happens when the way you see yourself begins to change? King eventually began sharing messages about personal growth and positivity online. Those messages reached a large audience and eventually became this book. And perhaps the reason the book connected with so many people is simple. Most of us want a good life, but we often have a strange definition of what that means. We think a good life begins when we finally get the things we want. More money, a better body, a better relationship, a better career, a bigger house, more recognition, more success. But let's stop here for a moment. Have you ever gotten something you really wanted, only to discover that the happiness didn't last as long as you expected? Maybe you bought something you've been saving for. Maybe you achieved something important. Maybe you finally reached a goal. For a while, you felt amazing, and then your mind adjusted. You wanted the next thing, and the next, and suddenly, you were back to feeling like something was missing. That's because we often try to build a good life entirely from the outside, and this book asks us to look somewhere else. Inside. Let's start with something very simple. Think about the way you speak to yourself, not the way you speak to other people, not the version of yourself you show on social media. I'm talking about the private conversation that happens inside your head when nobody else can hear it. You make a mistake. What do you say? You look in the mirror. What do you notice first? Something doesn't go according to plan. What does your mind immediately tell you? For many of us, that voice isn't particularly kind. I'm so stupid. Why can't I get anything right? I'm not good enough. Everyone else is ahead of me. I always mess things up. And the strange thing is, we often believe that being harsh with ourselves will motivate us. But imagine you had a close friend who spoke to herself exactly the way you speak to yourself. Would you encourage her to continue? Probably not. You'd tell her to be kinder. You'd remind her that mistakes happen. You'd tell her that one failure doesn't define her. So, why do we struggle to offer ourselves the same kindness? This is where Vex King brings us to one of the central ideas of the book, self-love. And self-love is much more practical than it sounds. It isn't standing in front of the mirror every morning and convincing yourself you're perfect. It's much quieter than that. It's forgiving yourself. It's resting when you're exhausted. It's respecting your own boundaries. It's taking care of your body. It's refusing to constantly compare yourself with everyone around you. It's being able to say, I have things I need to improve, but I don't have to hate myself while I improve them. And that distinction can completely change the way you grow. Because think about these two sentences. I need to change because I'm not good enough. Versus, I want to change because I care about myself. Which one sounds like it comes from love? And which one sounds like it comes from punishment? The goal isn't to stop growing. It's to stop believing that you have to hate yourself into becoming better. And once we start talking about how we treat ourselves, we naturally arrive at the voice inside our head. Because your relationship with yourself is built partly through your thoughts. And here's something worth remembering. Not every thought you have is true. Your mind can produce a thought in a fraction of a second. Someone doesn't reply to your message, and your mind says, they're angry with me. You make one mistake, and your mind says, I always fail. You see someone else's success, and your mind says, I'm behind. But notice what happened. Something small occurred, and your brain immediately created a story around it. The event was real. The story may not be. And this is where becoming aware of your thoughts becomes so important. Instead of automatically saying, I am going to fail, you can pause and say, I'm having the thought that I might fail. That tiny change creates distance. You are no longer completely inside the thought. You're observing it. And once you can observe something, you have a chance to choose what happens next. So the next time your mind gives you a harsh prediction, don't immediately fight it. Don't panic. Just ask, is this actually true? And then, is this thought helping me? Because your mind deserves attention, but it doesn't deserve automatic obedience. Now, let's take that idea one step further. Vex King talks a lot about energy and vibration. For some people, this language has a spiritual meaning. For others, it can be understood more practically. Think about how differently you experience the world depending on how you're feeling. On a day when you're already angry, someone's harmless comment can feel insulting. When you're insecure, someone's silence can feel like rejection. When you're exhausted, a small problem can feel impossible. But on a peaceful day, the same things might barely bother you. The outside world didn't necessarily change. Your internal state did. And this is why the book encourages us to become more conscious of the emotional state we repeatedly live in. But there's an important clarification here. Good vibes do not mean pretending that everything is okay. You are allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel disappointed. You're allowed to have days when you don't feel positive at all. The problem isn't having a negative emotion. The problem is allowing a temporary emotion to become a permanent identity. There's a difference between saying, I'm having a difficult day, and saying, my life is terrible. One is an experience. The other becomes a belief. And sometimes we accidentally turn a moment into a story about who we are. Now, let's look at something that influences those thoughts and emotions every single day. What you're feeding your mind. Think about your phone. How many times do you pick it up without even thinking? You scroll through other people's lives. You see perfect photographs, perfect relationships, perfect bodies, perfect holidays, perfect careers. And then you put the phone down, and somehow your own life feels smaller. But what did you just spend 30 minutes doing? You compared your real life with carefully selected pieces of other people's lives. So ask yourself honestly, what does your daily mental diet look like? What are you watching? Who are you listening to? What kind of conversations are you having? What accounts are you following? What kind of thoughts are you repeatedly feeding? Because just as your body is influenced by what you eat, your mind is influenced by what you repeatedly consume. And sometimes raising your energy doesn't require some huge spiritual transformation. Sometimes it simply means unfollowing something that constantly makes you feel inadequate, turning off the phone, going outside, talking to someone who makes you feel safe, reading something meaningful, sitting quietly for 10 minutes. Small changes, but repeated every day. They begin changing the environment your mind lives in, and that brings us naturally to the people around you. Think about the last time you spent time with someone who genuinely made you feel good. You didn't have to perform. You didn't have to prove anything. You could simply be yourself. Now think about someone who leaves you emotionally exhausted. Maybe you constantly feel judged around them. Maybe every conversation becomes negative. Maybe you leave feeling smaller than you did before. Have you ever noticed that difference? The book encourages us to become more protective of our energy. And that doesn't mean becoming cold. It means understanding that boundaries are necessary. You can love someone and still create distance. You can forgive someone and still decide not to repeat the same pattern. You can care about someone without giving them unlimited access to your peace. Sometimes protecting your energy isn't about changing another person. It's about changing how much access you give them. And once you start protecting your energy, something else becomes easier. Gratitude. Now, gratitude sounds simple, almost too simple. But think about how your mind naturally works. What do you notice first? The things you have or the things you don't? Most of us are experts at noticing what's missing. We notice the money we want, the body we want, the house we want, the relationship we want, the opportunities we missed, the life we haven't reached yet. And wanting more isn't wrong. The problem begins when wanting more makes us blind to what is already here. Maybe there's someone who loves you. Maybe there's a child smiling at you. Maybe there's food on your table. Maybe your body carried you through another difficult day. Maybe you have another morning to try again. These things become invisible because they're familiar. Gratitude makes them visible again. And it doesn't mean giving up your ambitions. You can say, I want more, and I'm grateful for what I have. Those two thoughts can exist together. In fact, perhaps that's one of the healthiest ways to pursue success. But what happens when you can't feel grateful? What happens when you're carrying something painful? A betrayal, a rejection, a mistake, a loss, something that happened years ago, but still has the power to change your mood in seconds. This is where the idea of letting go becomes important. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase everywhere you go. Inside are all the things people have done to you, every disappointment, every rejection, every regret. At first, you tell yourself, I have to carry this because it happened to me. But after years, you become exhausted. And eventually you realize you can remember what happened without carrying it everywhere. Letting go doesn't mean saying the past didn't matter. It doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means deciding that it doesn't get to control every day that comes after it. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about giving another person something. It's about giving yourself your present life back. And then there is something that can make letting go incredibly difficult. Comparison. You look at someone else's life, and suddenly your own feels behind. But here's the problem. You're seeing their highlight reel. While living your behind the scenes, you see their success. You don't see their fear. You see the photograph. You don't see the difficult day behind it. You see where they are now. You don't see everything that came before. So instead of asking, why am I not where they are? Perhaps ask something else. Am I further than I was before? That's a much fairer question, because your journey has its own timing. Someone else's success isn't evidence of your failure. Their chapter 20 doesn't make your chapter 10 worthless. And the moment you stop using other people's lives as a measuring stick, you get something incredibly valuable back. Your attention. You can finally use it to build your own life. But now, we reach the part where all this has to become real. Because knowing what you should do and actually doing it are two completely different things. You can listen to motivational videos every morning, read self-help books, write affirmations, make beautiful plans, and still wake up tomorrow and repeat the same habits. At some point, you have to act. Want confidence? Keep a promise to yourself. Want better health? Take one healthier action. Want to create something? Start creating. Want more peace? Stop repeatedly choosing what destroys it. It doesn't have to be dramatic. 10 pages of a book. A 10-minute walk. Putting the phone away. Go to sleep instead of scrolling. Having the conversation you've been avoiding. Saying no when you genuinely mean no. One small action. Then another. Then another. That's how a new life actually begins. Not through one huge moment, but through small decisions that you repeat until they become part of who you are. And maybe you're thinking, but what if I mess up? You will. Everyone does. You'll have days when you fall back into old habits. Days when you overthink. Days when you compare. Days when you lose motivation. That doesn't erase your progress. It simply means you're human. The goal isn't to become someone who never has a bad day. The goal is to become someone who knows how to begin again. Because sometimes we turn one bad decision into an entire bad week. We eat something unhealthy and decide the whole diet is ruined. We miss one workout and stop exercising. We have one terrible day and decide we're back to square one. But why? Why can't tomorrow simply be tomorrow? You don't need to punish yourself for yesterday. You can begin again, right where you are. And this brings us to perhaps the most beautiful idea in good vibes, good life. You don't have to wait until you become your perfect version to enjoy your life. Think about how often we postpone happiness. I'll be happy when I lose weight. I'll be happy when I earn more. I'll be happy when I find the right person. I'll be happy when my life becomes easier. But what if life never becomes completely easy? What if there's always another responsibility, another goal, another problem, another thing to fix? If happiness always waits for everything to be perfect, we could spend our entire lives waiting. A good life doesn't have to mean a problem-free life. Maybe it means having problems without losing yourself inside them. It means having goals without believing you're worthless until you achieve them. It means wanting change without hating your present self. It means being able to say, my life isn't exactly where I want it to be, but there is still something here worth appreciating. And that is a very different way of living. So, before we finish, let's hold on to the ideas that matter most, not as a list of rules, but as reminders you can take with you. Remember, the way you speak to yourself matters. You are the person you spend every moment of your life with. Make that relationship a little kinder. Remember, your thoughts aren't always facts. You can notice a thought without obeying it. Remember, protect your energy. Not everyone needs unlimited access to your time, attention, or peace. Remember, practice gratitude. Don't let the life you're trying to build make you blind to the life you're already living. Remember, release what you cannot change. The past can teach you, but it doesn't have to own you. Remember, stop comparing timelines. You are not late. You are simply living a different life. And most importantly, turn your mindset into action, because the best ideas in the world mean very little if they never change what you do. And now, before you leave, I want you to think about something. Not your entire life. Not all the things you need to fix. Just today. What is one thing you've been fighting against? Maybe it's your body. Maybe it's your past. Maybe it's another person. Maybe it's your circumstances. Maybe it's yourself. What would happen if, instead of fighting yourself today, you stood on your own side? Maybe you wouldn't suddenly become happier. Maybe nothing around you would change tomorrow morning, but something small could shift. The way you speak to yourself, the way you respond, the way you see what you already have, the way you decide what deserves your energy. And sometimes that's where transformation begins. Not with a completely different life, but with a different relationship with the life you already have. So when this video ends, don't try to remember every sentence. Take just one idea with you. Be kinder to yourself. Notice what is good. Release what is no longer yours to carry. Stop measuring your life against someone else's, and take one small step toward the person you want to become. Because a good life isn't something you suddenly find one day. It's something you quietly create in your thoughts, in your choices, in your relationships, and in the way you treat yourself every single day. And perhaps that's what good vibes, good life is really reminding us. You don't need to wait for life to become perfect to start living it beautifully. You can begin here. You can begin today. And you can begin with yourself. And if this book left you with even one thought worth carrying into your life, don't let it end with this video. Take that thought with you. Practice it. Live it. And remember, sometimes changing your life doesn't begin with changing everything around you. It begins with changing the way you see yourself. Thank you for spending this time with Actionable Listener. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep becoming the person you were meant to be.